So this is Marianne from the Corn Wagon, and today we're on block 7, excuse me, for the Homegrown block of the month from Sue Spargo. And today we're going to be doing 3 different stitches that you probably will use in your blocks. So if you have any other questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them for you. The first stitch we're going to do is called the scroll stitch, and it's a pretty dramatic little stitch that's kind of fun to do. With this one, I'm going to turn the camera down. You're going to want to use a thicker thread. You don't want to use something that's really thin because it's not going to show up on anything. Yeah.
A 5?
Yeah, or even something fun like a silk and pearl.
Oh.
Which is this one here. This one that I'm using on this sample is the Dazzle from Sue Spargo.
Oh.
Now these are just a little bit harder to use. They're made from rayon and they have a bounce to them.
They're slippery.
And they are a little slippery, but you can see that it forms really a fun little stitch. Yeah. And it's called the scroll stitch. And the razzle's really fun because it has just a little bit of a sparkle to it.
Yeah. That is really cute.
So what I'm going to do is bring my thread up, and you can see that I've already started the scroll stitch here.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And I'm going to take a little bite coming towards me, but I'm going to do it on a little bit of an angle. You see how if it were straight, if I were doing a straight line, then my stitch is at an angle. And my thread's going to come behind my needle, and then I'm going to wrap it around the bottom of the needle and kind of pull it in tight. And then I'm going to very carefully pull my thread through. And you can see how it makes this little swirl or circle right here.
Mm-hmm.
So the trick with this one is not to pull it too tight, because you want that little lacy kind of look to it. So again, I'm going to...
So have you marked your...
No. I'm going to do the little tiny stitch like this.
Mm-hmm.
And the thread needs to come back behind my needle and then all the way around here. So it's
Around
almost
and then
made a
on top?
complete circle.
Around.
Underneath and underneath both times.
But then you're bringing it back over the top. Oh, it doesn't matter. Okay. I see.
And then pull it and see how it makes that little scroll.
And that's where you don't pull too tight.
Yeah, I don't want to pull too tight or it won't give that circular motion. Now this tends to kind of pop up until I do my next stitch. So don't worry about that too much. So it's coming underneath the top part of the needle and underneath the bottom part of the needle. And pull it through. And it's just a little tricky to get it.
It's because of the thread.
And this thread is definitely a little harder to work with.
So if you were to use a 5
You could use
thread,
a 5, it would work very nicely. An 8 still may be just a little bit too small. You could use it, but it's not going to show that little scroll
As well.
quite as much. I'm going to just finish this, but you could see that this thread does tend to kind of be a little bit more difficult. Sorry, I'm going to have to use a little bit of spit there.
as we all do.
As we all do, yeah.
If I can, and see when it gets to this point, it's just a little harder to thread too. The other problem with these rayon threads is they tend to kind of come off the spool. And so you'll see that I have my razzle right there in a little package because it just boings right out.
I bought some of those bobbin things that kind of wrap around. And then I found if I wind some off and then just wind quite a few around in the one spot in the middle and put that on. It holds it.
And these are
Okay.
also, these are called thread guards
Ah.
from Sue Spargo, and they work quite nicely. It's just this little clingy piece of plastic,
Oh, yeah. So, yeah.
and you
that
can
makes
wrap
sense.
it around the razzle or the dazzle,
Yeah,
Oh.
because they both do it. That's nice.
and it kind of keeps it in check.
It's a pain when it does this
Yeah.
because it
Yeah.
sometimes tangles.
Well, yeah,
So-
you can't find the end.
These come in a little package of 5, and if you're getting razzle or dazzle, this might be worth it,
It
just
might,
to
yeah.
keep it in check. But
Yeah.
once in a while, this will happen where
Yeah.
it just
You don't-
boings all
Before
out.
you can even do anything, yeah. Boings.
Boing. That's how it seems.
Perfectly good word for it.
Yeah, and I might have to get a new thread because this one isn't quite.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So the silken pearl,
This silk and pearl also makes a beautiful scroll stitch. It is my favorite for bullions, but I think I might have to get a new
even the
thread to
5,
finish that.
and you do bullions with the 5.
With this, yes, it's gorgeous.
Oh, I've been doing bullions with 8 all the
Yeah.
time. 'Cause
And-
thinking that
Because
bullion,
that's what it's mostly called for.
but I was thinking it'd be too big, I guess. But
It isn't. This is my favorite for bullions.
Ah.
This silk and pearl, and we do have a lot of colors, and I've ordered a number of other colors. They should be in this week sometime. So look for these. My very favorite thread.
Yeah, I know we had, but I've
But
not. But I've never tried them because I thought they were too big.
So the scroll stitch again is just a really fun one. It's not too hard.
Marianne, I'm sorry, just to go back to the bullions, didn't you say you have to do the wrapping a certain way on the silk and
You
pearl?
do, and it's really hard because it doesn't come on a spool. It comes in a skein, so you really have to try it to see which way is the correct way.
And if it's the wrong way, it
It
unrolls kind of?
unwinds it. So try it the other way. It just makes a much prettier bullion if you don't unwind it as you do the
Right.
bullion.
Yeah, I knew that's what we started
There was
buying
something
is that, and then I've
tricky,
never
yeah.
tried them because
Because we're afraid.
we're afraid.
Yeah. And the second stitch I'm going to do is called the Basque stitch.
BASQUE.
It's like the Basque people of Spain. Yes, BASQUE. And I watched Mary Corbett to kind of refresh my mind, and she actually does it slightly different than Sue Spargo does. So you'll find with these stitches that there are differences in how different people do the stitch. I actually did it this way, which looks really cool, don't you think? But actually that's the wrong way to do it.
Oh,
Another stitch.
This is
by
actually,
Marianne.
I think, the correct way. But when I did Mary Corbett, this is more how she does the stitch. And this is how other people do the stitch. So I'm going to show you
because
this way.
hers are straight up and down,
Right.
and this is that.
So it's going to
kind of-
look kind of like a crown. If you do it on something, round, then it kind of gives a little sunburst kind of look to something. But I'm going to do it on this leaf right here. I'm going to bring my thread up, and then I'm going to take a stitch, probably about 1/4 of an inch, if that's the height that I want my little picots or whatever you'd call them. And like with the scroll stitch, my thread's going to come behind the needle. But on this one, instead of coming all the way around, I'm going to wrap it counterclockwise. So this
So
this
you're making a
stitch,
figure 8 on it.
you're making like a figure 8, and this is actually, this little stitch right here is called the twisted chain.
I was going to say, I feel like we've done that.
So it's kind of a twisted chain mixed with a blanket stitch.
Okay.
I've done that stitch, I've wrapped it around counterclockwise, and then I'll pull it through. You can see how it makes like a twisted chain.
Yeah.
Then I'm going to sink it up here like I would a chain stitch, and come back into this little section so it kind of forms a blanket stitch along the edge. So I'll make that.
So on this one, were you coming back in a different spot then? Is
I
that?
wasn't doing that extra little stitch. And again, I'm going to come towards me with the thread back behind the needle, and then I'm going to wrap it counterclockwise around my needle. And then I'm going to do a little tack stitch here, tack it down like you would a lazy daisy, and come back in so it forms that kind of blanket stitch along the edge.
Okay.
So let's do it just a couple of more times. I take my stitch it's about 1/4 of an inch. You could do it longer if you wanted, of course. And it's going to come behind and then counterclockwise around my needle, and see how it forms that twisted chain, and then back up so the edge is going to look much like a blanket stitch. But it kind of forms, again, kind of a dramatic little
Yeah.
stitch. And it's really fun either on a straight place or on a round.
And
it
that
looks
would
really pretty.
generally be a size 8 thread.
You could use whatever you wanted. This is actually a size 5 that I'm using right here.
Oh,
And it's a variegated, it's a Suspargo one. But it forms those little picots that are kind of fun. Yeah, it's cute.
Very cute. And then in the book, they've got some right next
Close to each other. Yeah, you can do them however close you
Yeah.
want.
I feel like I like this, but it's interesting. A different, just a totally different look.
well, the picture is, but when
Yeah.
she's actually doing them, I don't know if they
They're
can.
not quite that
If
close.
they can get them that close or not, I guess they could be able to.
And the third stitch we're going to do is called a split stitch. And the split stitch is a really easy stitch. Oh, you know, one thing I'm going to show you here is how to complete this. So I'm going to just finish these. I'm going to tack it, come back down here. So when you finish this stitch, you do want to tack it down. So I'm going to do my last one here, thread behind, and then counterclockwise. And then when you finish it up, sink it here, come back up there, and then just tack it down.
Okay.
And then I'm going to use the same needle. This last one is called the split stitch. And you also need to use sort of a heavier thread on this one. I wouldn't use a 12, or even an 8 might be a little bit too small.
So
I don't
5?
think I have any 12s.
No.
I'm going to take just a length of this silk and pearl and do a split stitch, if I can find the end of it.
And so do you need to know which way it's twisted on that?
No, I don't think it'll matter.
Just on
this
the
one.
bullion?
Let me get another one. I can't find the end. Some of these are kind of a mess, aren't they? Here's a little piece I can use. So this is silk and pearl. You don't want to use really long strands of this because it does tend to wear, the silk does. And I find if I do it wrong and unpick it with silk and pearl, you probably can't use the thread over again. You know, it gets a little worn. I'm going to do just a little split stitch. You can see my little circle here, how I have done a chain stitch around there. And the split stitch will look much like this when I'm done, but it's done an entirely different way.
So it's a good outlining stitch?
Yeah. I'll bring my thread up. And most of the tutorials will show this done with kind of a pick and stab. You know what I mean by that? So I'm gonna stab it down a stitch length. And then when I come back up, I'm gonna come about in the middle, maybe a little bit to...
Not through
not
the thread.
quite. You
Not
go,
through the thread.
you go
just
right through the thread
Oh, you go
when
right-
I
oh.
come back up.
Okay.
right through the thread. So
And that's
where
why
the
it's called
split.
split.
Oh.
And that's why you can't use something really fine, because splitting
Yeah.
a hair is a little bit difficult. So I'm going to come forward a stitch length and then back halfway and split that, or go right in the middle of it. And after I do a few stitches, you'll see that it kind of, it's a little tricky. If your eyes aren't very good, you're going to miss the middle of it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Get out your magnifying glass. But it will kind of have the look of the chain stitch, but not quite as wide or not quite as fat, because
That's a nice outline stitch.
the chain stitch will have 2 threads, and this one will only have one that's split in half. Let me go just a few stitches so you can see what this will look like.
Oh, that looks like it'd be a good one for that silk thread.
So if you look really closely, you can see that there's kind of a look of a chain stitch
Oh,
on
I
it,
like that look.
Yeah.
That's a
but
nice
not
outline.
quite as big.
Sometimes the chain feels
Too
too
fat.
big.
Yeah, I like to outline things, but sometimes it is too.
This one is just a little bit more under control. One thing you can do is do it all in one motion. So I'm going to go forward and then back like I'm doing a stem stitch and split.
Then physically put it on. Ah.
Yeah. That might be better if you can't see.
So you're going to split it. But I think the
But how do
poke
you
and
know
stab,
exactly where
no,
you're-
it's kind of hard.
To
The
know where
poke and
middle is.
stab is probably a more controlled
Yeah, 'cause
way
it would
of
be hard
doing
to know
it.
where that middle is.
But you can do it in one motion if you like. But yeah, it's a really nice little
Oh, I like that one.
Mm-hmm.
outline stitch. Let me put it by the camera. That you can use, but just use a little bit bigger. I think this 5 would work nicely. And this one I've done with a split stitch. And you can almost hardly tell
Yeah.
it between that one
But it does a nice finishing on it, doesn't it?
and the chain.
Yeah, that's nice.
Is that a 5 on yet?
That one I actually
That looks
used the
smaller.
razzle. And
Oh.
so
Mm-hmm.
the razzle, I'm not sure what size the razzle is. It's probably an 8. It's not as big. Those are the stitches that we have for this month. Next month you'll actually get the block for the middle of your quilt. So this will be the last one with the little houses in it.
I'm only 7 behind.
And then after the middle part with the tree, then you'll get the border for the middle, and then we go outside to the outside borders.
Cool.
So 3 months. Yeah.
Well, this
How-
is
how
this
many-
is
No, we
7.
we have
8,
5
9, 10,
left.
11, 12. I
How
have
many of the
5.
outside borders, is that several?
Yes, there's several
That's gonna
different
be
ones there.
4 classes of the outside border then.
Okay.
Because the next one will be the middle one, that'll be
And
month
then
8.
4.
And some of the times I've actually reserved for reviewing the stitches or doing any that we haven't done that are on
Oh,
your
okay.
list.
Okay.
So we can do that and work on other stitches too.
Nice.
Okay.
Okay.
But
Thank
thanks
you.
for joining us.
Thank you.
Well, thank
I'll
you.